Welcome to another episode of ECCB Connects. The 95th meeting of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank was held at the ECCB headquarters on 14 February 2020 under the chairmanship of the Council member for St. Lucia, the Honorable Alan M. Chastanet, during which the Council received the Governor's report on monetary and credit conditions in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Following the meeting, media practitioners in St. Kitts and Nevis engaged with the Council member for St. Lucia, the Honorable Alan M. Chastanet, the Council member for the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, and Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.J. Antoine, where they fielded questions on a number of topics, including growth in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the impact of the cannabis industry on the regional economy, intra-regional travel, and the EC Digital Currency Pilot Project. On this week's episode of ECCB Connects, we share with you highlights from that media engagement.
What's the projected or expected growth for the region, for the currency union for 2020? And has that projection changed in light of the China-US trade war, which still has not been resolved, as well as the impact the coronavirus is having on the world market?
The growth rate projected for 2020 is 3.2%. And that did take into consideration the coronavirus, as well as the uncertainty as it pertains to the trade wars that are taking place. And that number is down from 2019 and also 2018. So it was taken into consideration in moving forward.
What plans does the currency union have in place to deal with the mass exodus of banks from across the region?
Essentially, I just want to confirm we have now received applications from both FCIB, CIBC, or CIBC, FCIB, and in respect of the sale of 2/3 of the FCIB to the Gilinski Group. And we have also, as of this week, received a formal application from the indigenous banks which are proposing to purchase the RBC operations in the Eastern Caribbean. We are working with regulators across the region in respect of the first matter. As you know, the first matter of FCIB is not just an ECCU matter. In fact, it is across the Caribbean. So Barbados is the lead regulator on this matter, but all central banks are involved. There has already been a college of regulators, that is to say, a meeting of the supervisors, bank supervisors, on this issue. That was held at the end of January, and the application is now being assessed. In respect of the RBC operations, having received the application this week, we've now commenced our assessment of the applications, and we will evaluate it on its merits. In respect of the exodus of the Canadian banks, that has been foreshadowed for some time now. This is not a new development. And so the Council has taken this matter in stride. The position of the Council, and certainly the bank, has always been that in light of this development, the additional responsibility does fall on our indigenous banks to take more of the load, as it were, in terms of the banking system in the ECCU. And a lot of the efforts have been to support our indigenous banks to be able to take that additional responsibility. So, for example, the idea of pursuing a shared service for risk and compliance is intended to do just that. Give them additional support to be able to not just be as compliant as they can be, but also to improve the quality of the compliance, but also to lower the costs of compliance. One of the things that Scotia did very well is that it spread those costs across 19-20 jurisdictions. And therefore there is a lesson there for indigenous banks as well. So we are taking it in stride. We continue, and we believe that approach, that initiative, will help not just with compliance at the level of the banks and their compliance in respect of the central bank, but perhaps just as importantly, the preservation of their corresponding banking relations. We believe that this is potentially going to give additional confidence and comfort to correspondent banks.
The
financial institutions, I understand, will have a difficulty in accepting monies derived from cannabis growth. What did you all discuss as to how the possibilities of countering that kind of difficulty? Because it's not just here in the Caribbean, but elsewhere as well, that it's considered to be monies coming from drugs or narcotics.
Essentially, what the bank has sought to do is to bring to the council some thoughts on how this sector how this industry is evolving. It's budding, it's new, it's in its infancy or nascent stage. And what the report identified was some of the possibilities. The fact that this is now a billion-dollar, a multi-billion-dollar industry. A lot of it is driven by healthcare. I mean, people talk about recreational marijuana use, which of course is significant. But the driver really of this global demand for medicinal marijuana is its potential to help people with various health conditions. And as a consequence, potentially provide a niche for our region. We recognize the opportunities there, and our suggestions go along the line of ensuring a strong supervisory framework. For anything that you promote, you have to make sure you appropriately regulate. And I say appropriately, you do not want to over-regulate anything, but you also do not want to do light touch to the point where you create public harm. So a lot of the focus at this stage is on sharing lessons, sharing experiences, ensuring an adequate supervisory framework, and clarity and a distinction between obviously recreational use, between decriminalization, which is to say you don't, give somebody some kind of sentence or a charge for relatively small quantities, and the development of an industry. The focus of our report was on a medicinal cannabis, the industry, what it can do for us. The report also highlights the obvious fact that there are hurdles to be overcome, significant hurdles in respect of the fact that this is still a prohibited substance under the UN Convention and at the federal level in the United States. So that means that countries cannot transact directly with the US at this point. They can with Canada, because of course Canada, it's approved at the federal level in Canada. So there are limitations, but there are also possibilities, and I think the region wants to position itself. The reality is that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, now in St. Kitts and Nevis, legislation has been enacted in at least 2 member countries for the development of a medicinal cannabis industry. We're also aware of legislation passed in Antigua and Barbuda with respect to some decriminalization, and Antigua and Barbuda has also expressed interest in developing a medicinal cannabis industry. Other countries have begun consultations which may lead to some kind of enactment of some sort at a later stage. So we wanted to be proactive to the extent that we can be and just signal what the possibilities are, while also highlighting the risk and then discussing how we can manage those risks going forward as a currency union.
Another issue that is not only affecting the ECCU, but also the broader Caribbean, which is intra-regional travel. Was that also discussed, and how is the Monetary Council looking to deal with that in light of goods and services being a must across the entire council in terms of islands?
Interregional transportation has been and continues to be a critical issue. I think we all welcomed the appointment of the former Prime Minister of Barbados, Owen Arthur, as the new chairman, and there are several new board members on LIAT, and I'm really hoping that we're going to get a report sooner than later in terms of what the way forward. Prime Minister Arthur is a gentleman I think that we all have a tremendous amount of respect for, and certainly was a major architect of LIAT and the revitalization of LIAT. So I think that there's nobody better placed in moving forward. Certainly from a St. Lucia perspective, I think that ECCA has been an impediment to the development of the aviation in our region. And I say that to say to you that if you take the ECCU, which is where ECCA is in charge of, we have a population of 750,000 people. And if you take the Bahamas with a population of 380,000 people, Bahamas has 25 indigenous carriers. They have 8 charter companies and they have 5 cargo companies. We have 1. commercial carrier. We have 3 charter companies, and we have now 1 helicopter company. So I think the evidence speaks for itself that there's something that's preventing this industry to be able to grow. And when you think of the cost of travel, the poor schedules that we have, how is it that more private sector people have not emerged underneath to be able to make this thing work? And certainly from a St. Lucia perspective, all roads point to ECCA as a major impediment, because I think that ECCA is really only supposed to be a safety and security regulatory agency. It's not supposed to be involved in the commercial aspects. And some of the policies that they have are infringing, in my mind, on the commercial approvals for us moving forward.
Can you comment further on the fiscal debt sustainability issue? Are you all satisfied that the situation is improving, and how fast do you think you all need to go to achieve what the landmarks?
I think that as a region, we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think the one thing that has eluded our region on a consistent basis is the benchmark that was established by the bank of 5% growth per year. And I think that that's the number we're still struggling with. But I think that there is more and more discussion that's taking place. And as I indicated, working backwards in terms of where we need to go, and now starting to focus on those industries that we believe that can make the greatest quantum leap for us. So for instance, one of the fastest growing sectors in our region is the IT sector, and what we call the call centers. And the infrastructure requirement is not as substantial as some of the other industries. Yet they're huge employer generators, very good foreign exchange earners, and that we have a competitive advantage because of our ability to speak English and our proximity to some of the core markets. So we've seen in Jamaica that it probably has been the #1 impact on reducing unemployment. So certainly in a case of a Dominica, I know in a St. Lucia and in some of the other islands, we're seeing that sector grow. It also focuses a lot on young people, and particularly women. So in my country in particular, my unemployment rate is high, but it's even higher for women and for younger women. And so this is a sector that really absorbs a lot of talent from particularly women and being young. So I believe that we have a very bright future. I think that we're moving in the right direction, but I do believe that by a greater emphasis on growth and some of the critical sectors and the cost of doing business, that we will in fact see an acceleration in our growth rate, and the result of that will continue to reduce our debt to GDP numbers significantly.
With regards to the economic growth of the sub-region, what will it take for the Eastern Caribbean to have a significant growth rate that will stimulate the development of the sub-region? What will it take?
There are really 2 thresholds of GDP that we need to be focusing on. One is, what's the minimum GDP that we require in our countries in order to be able to run a surplus budget and to stay within the macro frameworks of having less than a 60% debt to GDP, having primary surpluses, and to the best of possibility to have an overall surplus, and to be able to be building reserves. So what's the minimum GDP that would allow our countries to be able to do that? And then the second question is, what is our potential of total potential of GDP production, our output in our individual countries? The ECCB has given a target number. I won't reveal that number, but a number nonetheless. And therefore, it's to now work backwards to determine what are the sectors that we're going to have to focus on to be able to achieve those numbers. So certainly, St. Lucia, in our dialogue with the World Bank and the IMF, have continued to reiterate the position that on smaller states like ours, that we must start with micro policy before we get into macro policy. Because the number of industries or sectors or things that we can invest in to create the kind of economic output that we need are limited. So it's better to start with what that limited number is and what are the ones that offer us the greatest amount of potential. So clearly, I mean, without much investigation, tourism, offshore financial services, agro-processing, and now the new orange industry, of the creative industry. All are sectors which we believe that we can excel at and that we have the resources to be able to be competitive on a global basis. And what we must make sure is both our micro policies and macro policies are there to be able to support those particular sectors. So I would again say to you, tourism also offers us the opportunity of increasing airlift, increasing capacity within our countries, and creates now a platform for financial services and also the orange economy. I don't know, Prime Minister, if you want to add anything.
I agree with you entirely, Prime Minister. I think also we have to look at the issue of our productivity in the region, and both in the public and private sector. Are we getting sufficiently in return for the amount we spend? And we also have to look at human resource development and the training of our people. Are we training people to align with our national priorities or regional priorities? Or are people just going out there to acquire degrees that, one, may not be able to find them a job, and secondly, that may not be necessary for our current developmental thrust. So I think these things we need to look at going forward. And I also think from a regional standpoint, I mean, we have some cooperation taking place, functional cooperation, etc. But we need to look at what are some of the things we can share in terms of doing things together. So is there something that we are all doing that we can consolidate into one country and do it on our behalf if each of us pitching in to make it happen? Because we have to look at the issue of access to credit and the impact of climate change on our region, the cost of reconstruction, and the potential of these things having an impact on your fiscal space and your debt burden. So, but I believe that I agree we have to look at some of the new areas, the blue economy, moving towards the digital economy, and knowing precisely what this means and what do we need to put in place as a region to benefit from the moving towards the digital economy. But tourism, I agree, is a place that still has huge potential. Agriculture, agro-processing, as the Prime Minister indicated. That sometimes we look for this big factory, but when you add all of these cottage industries and all of these agro-processing enterprises in our region, when added up, they can have even a greater impact on our GDP than these huge companies, huge manufacturing plants we're looking at. So I think we need to look at these cottage industries, these agro-processing enterprises, and how can we assist in building capacity and allow them to grow, and eventually maybe even get into a medium-sized enterprise.
Can we just get a quick update as to where you guys are and the next steps in relation to the creation of the EC digital currency?
So we are very advanced now with the completion of phase one. Phase one is the development and testing phase. So when we launched last March, we said that would take 12 months. So we are nearing the end of that first phase. The next phase is basically public education about the use of the digital currency and the training of our pilot partners. So that is the banks, the credit unions, and the mobile wallet providers, the vendors, I should say. So that is supermarkets, utility companies, other vendors, because that's important. You need to have a good network of vendors so that people can transact. And of course, to transact, the vendors need to have a bank or credit union, some financial institution that. So we have identified the financial institutions. We are continuing to register vendors. And in that phase, which will happen sort of between March and end of May, public education and training. And then we plan to launch in June. We plan to go with a live deployment of the digital currency dollar in June. We're very pleased that in this meeting, the Monetary Council approve the amendments to the ECCB agreement to ensure that digital currency is defined. Currency includes digital currency. Because, of course, when the Act was written and enacted in 1983, 1984, digital currency was not around as we know it now. So we now have the legal cover to proceed, and we are well advanced. So the app has been prepared. It's being tested. We've had a number of focus groups going through the countries, making sure that we understand the user experience, refining the user experience on the app. And as we will announce shortly, there'll be 2 models to be used to make sure people can access. So essentially, our proposal is to have the fastest, cheapest, and safest payment instrument in the ECCU in digital dollars, EC dollars that is. So we're not talking US, this is EC dollars, one. And secondly, we want to make sure that we give people the wherewithal to move around, move resources around as quickly as possible, whether you have a bank account or not. So obviously, if you have a bank account or a credit union account, that's easier. But if you don't, there is also an option for you. And we're doing that in the context of ensuring appropriate safeguards for money laundering and terrorist financing. So AML CFT protocols apply. We are working with financial institutions to ensure that their systems, so they will basically use their system, their existing systems, to work with their customers because they already know their customers. They already have profiles on their customers, so that is not difficult. And then for the other model, an appropriate onboarding process to ensure that the AML CFT protocols are observed. Those are the things that we have been working on. And like I said, our plan is to go live in June.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place at your convenience, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at ECCB Connects.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next week when we bring you another program to share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. Thanks for watching.